in the chat between 5:30 and 5:50. Grand, I'll start in 3, 2, 1. Beth and I are going to win very simply for opening government. We're running a lot of claims, right? We're going to analyze in a bunch of reasons what the comparative is specifically about the motion and reason and why we think kids' lives or people's lives necessarily going to be better. Before that, a lot of points of framing, weighing, and all the fun stuff, right? So what do we think that who specifically is this house or who is doing this? I do think it's both, like it can be parents and schools, just an overwhelming narrative in a society that latches onto kids, right? A narrative which looks like parents telling kids, like when faced with a decision, to like go through pros and cons, like take a deep breath, take a step back and sit down. When faced with a conflict, like not to react, like minimize generally the reach of emotions, like on both sides, whether to just even not express, like being overly capital or dramatic or sad, but more importantly, to learn how to like mitigate your intuitive reactions to things, right? I think that overall, minimizing your emotions in certain instances, like disregarding them if possible on an intuitive level before approaching certain in situations in life is probably good, even if it means less showing, right? Look, in terms of if anyone wants to run principal obligation, I think we're all going to agree in this round that whatever parents and kids do, they have an obligation to help kids and provide them with utility, meaning, so I think that's the primary question in the round. Whoever helps them in life most also feels obligation to whatever parents or kids have towards kids reaching like a better life or having better interactions, quality of life, etc. What I think comparative is probably in this debate, I'm going to take the best case for opposition here, right? I think the best case for op, it's like we teach them both, right? Or we teach them that like sometimes you're supposed to approach with reason, and sometimes it's fine for you to feel emotion, to express, and you're completely valid in doing so. We're going to now provide you a bunch of reasons. They're going to be a setup for all of our arguments. Why specifically think that's harmful? Because we think at the point where you prioritize like both, or even with prioritize emotions, by best for op, you teach both. Emotions are so overriding, so irrational that I think it's going to still lead you to bad decisions, meaning we auto prioritize teaching kids logic and reason to override the existence of the emotions of the still be kids misbalanced or not, even if they teach them similarly, right? Look, why specifically teaching logic and suppressing emotion is good. Firstly, I think on the comparative, emotions come naturally to you, right? It's your intuitive like thought or an image in your mind that is often biological. We often tends to be overwhelming, strong, and short-termist, right? But it's something that is quite intuitive to most of humans, right? It's something that doesn't have to be thought. I think meaning the access to your emotions generally throughout life is probably just sort of greater. You have a lower like barrier as opposed to logic, right? So if you were to obviously leave a child that was never like sort of socially conditioned, he was more likely to like always feel emotions, expressed emotions, as opposed to like come to something and then apply like logic methods and arguments to it, right? Meaning, if I think that at the point on the comparative when you have to prioritize logic or like methods to like cool off and sit down and assess reasoning, because or like learning how to like form pros and cons, how to make arguments, what are the long-term possibilities, here are all the things you have to consider. I think it takes a lot more time. I think it takes a lot more patience, it takes a lot more work and effort to actually work through this, right? So I think focusing on that as opposed to emotions that are intuitive is probably better. Secondly, I think emotions are short-term. So when you allow yourself to feel firstly and think later, you don't think about consequences intuitively, right? You allow yourself to express sadness or anger instantly for the satisfaction just of letting it out, or like people and telling you like it's fine if you have to cry out, or if you have to yell at someone, do it, right? Look, best on op, catharsis is cool, but catharsis is short term, right? I think impulsive, it means impulsive. You don't think about the consequences of your actions. So at some point, you're going to have to backtrack or feel regret. You're going to like question yourself, be like, yes, at that point, like after a few hours, after a few days, the short term like catharsis that you felt is genuinely quite like unimportant to you. At the point you realize you might have fucked up your entire relationship, or might have fucked up like some more important decision in your life, right? Thirdly, I think emotions are unpredictable. Look, meaning in certain situations in life, interactions, whatever, the emotions that come to you might not be the appropriate ones or the expected ones for you specifically, or even the people around you. Meaning if you have a lower threshold of how much you allow yourself emotions, but based on all the characteristics that are more likely to be overriding, I think you're going to find yourself in quite uncomfortable situations or feel embarrassed. Why? I think this is also quite important piece of analysis from OG. The world that exists today doesn't favor emotions, and don't think it's likely to change. Look, our lives are structured to be played by the rules. Note, our social interactions are genuinely and fucking defined by structure and hierarchy. Since you come to school, there are things that you are allowed to say to people, how to treat like your teacher, right? But also like knowing fucking dating, you genuinely have like a bunch of rules before you actually are allowed to get closer to a human being, because what we find to be socially acceptable, getting intimate with another human being, right? Know that like you're being in terms of career, in terms of school, you're a cog in a fucking system since the beginning of your life. You're also then on a very, I think, contradictory enough from society, taught to prioritize others for the sake of seeming nice and altruistic so they feel comfortable, so you're out not to express your emotions too much or genuinely, intrude in their personal space. But you're then also taught, specifically from the capitalist system, to also then prioritize yourself internally and to make the best specific rational decisions for you so you can push yourself over the structure, right? I think with all these rules and structures that one lives, nowhere in there are you genuinely allowed to express a lot of emotions, or the emotion necessarily going to be favored, because this is something that we seem to be embarrassed, and it's taking a lot of time, or something might intrude on the comfort of other people or their societal acceptance of how you might feel generally. Why is this all important? Because what are the impacts? The reason I think it's better to then teach reason and logic when approaching life is firstly because I think you're going to make better long-term decisions in life. Look, at the point where you have to decide of genuinely if you're going to like take a certain course, right? Or even like a more important decision in your life, specifically, I don't know, if you want to go to like art or study art, or want to be something that's going to bring you more benefits in life, right? I think if you're swayed by emotions like beauty, aestheticism, or whatever it is that just sort of comes like naturally to people and let yourself into it, I don't think you're going to consider all the things that might sort of fuck you up in the future, right? I think you're then also less likely to interact with other people to come and reason and see what the best decision is for you and get their advice, because you're just used to going and letting your heart make these decisions for you. And it's likely to screw you over in a couple of ways. Before I go on, I'll take closing opposition.
Are parents likely to react to a child crying with sadness and anger in a society that is built around this sort of narrative, and when you're promoting this motion?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear the POI, but I heard like the anger sadness why I like it to react. So I think that you're going to like it to react on like that your side of the house, because then the more comes more naturally to you. So even if you still teach people reason and everything, you're still going to have emotions override your decisions or override how you assess situations in your life, right? Because of all the characteristics I've given to you, and anger, sadness, or whatever are still emotions quite intense. So I think I genuinely did prove what you asked me. Sorry. Look. Then again, I think that specifically not talking to people because you're sort of used to making decisions on your own, obviously it leads to less information that you can have or assessing important decisions. But also, I think you're going to be better with dealing in conflict, specifically in interpersonal relationships, right? That already sort of are emotionally induced, but specifically if you're allowed to just like rant or to like express everything that you're fucking feeling all the time and sort of be that type of person, I think it's going to be much more difficult to also deal with conflict, but also to take into account what other people are feeling, because you're the type of person that constantly emotional, ranting, etc. I think it's also quite detrimental for interpersonal relationship based on all of the analysis that I've given to you previously. I think even if you end up fucking up on our side of the house, rationalization is key as opposed to regretting, overreacting, or being swayed by ideals. You can tell yourself that you did your best, that people around you agreed based on the reason, and if it ends up being fucked up, whatever, you genuinely tried your best and you tried to see if that decision didn't work out, you're going to do better the next. I don't want to regret and be like, oh, I emotionally reacted, I fucked up, and then there's nothing I can do about it now. For all the reasons, vote open government.
Thank you very much for that speech. I'd now like to invite the opposition leader up.
My speech starts in 3, 2, 1. Logically, everyone knows that WUDC is a competition, but yet the CA decided to do a panel training today on emotional comforting, where like it's not the end of the world. This is to say that the highlight of emotional inherently is within each and every one of us, right? So the stand here that we want to say is like, this is a emotions about prioritizing. Like they said, it's not exclusive on both sides, but what they have to defend on government world is why logical is such a accessible and such an important that you have to exclusively prioritize, and they cannot coexist with emotional, because understand that our side, we allow a logical discussion as well, but we do understand and note and highlight the importance of emotional, that inherently every single one of us is inherent from birth, right? I have two arguments here. First, let's move on to the principle, 2 layers of analysis. First, dignity as a human being. We believe on our OO side that every single one of us, including our children, have an autonomy to choose what to do with ourselves, how to express ourselves in this world. Even if we want to conform into a social structure and whatnot, we still need this to function as a human being, because this is the core value. Because not how they never explain to us how this logical approach is such an exclusivity. We tell you 4 harm why it's come from logical approach. Number 1, the logical approach that you're talking about on government side most likely going to come from a majority and mainstream media, because note how logical approach has been shifted through the society, through the progressive society. It also means that you're only going to conform to a majority metric of what deems are logical. Secondly, even if you say oh, maybe it's the best case scenario, we still think that it conforms to a capitalistic meritocratic reasoning, right? Those things are very harmful because it doesn't include every single person. It does not equate every single individual as a very valuable as it is. Thirdly, it's very inaccessible. It requires a lot of intellectual capacity to be a better in logical approach, or to understand or identify which metric you ought to judge this debate or ought to solve this problem and whatnot. Lastly, it's a form of oppressions, because note how this is even if you take that best, that logical is so important, we still think that human nature, by giving the natural reactions that we have through our experience and how we ought to see the world, you oppress yourself because you want to always have this metric and conclusive answer of the argument that you have or the interaction that you have. Secondly, why is it so harmful for freedom of expressions, which is the authenticity of human being? Human inherently is different. That's why we are very, very unique in our own way. Even if you are born twin, you still have different response to how you see your parent love and perceive those love, which also means that number 1, you have your own sets of value and emotions that's shaped by your experience and how we should value it as well, because that's how you know what's best for you when you make decisions or how you express yourself. If you want to be a grumpy person, or per se, if they said I'm very irrational and whatnot, we think that's fine, because that is directly engaged with their idea of oh, emotion is very bad, because when you express your emotion, people are not able to understand you. We think it's good, because now this metric alone, that my emotion is different from you, allowed me to understand that you are not my people. I will never be able to be close friends to you, and that's why I don't have to invest millions and millions of time. I just have to find someone who share the same value and reactions of emotions when we see cute cat and cute dog, to form a better safe space and better real connections compared to OG, right? But also, society don't favor emotions. It's not enough for them to win this debate. They have to prove why it's so harmful and logically why it's exclusive unique. Because note how just because oh, society haven't been empathized enough, is to say that you have to radically remove empathy. If you have to argue that the reverse is actually true. But secondly, why is logical approach is very, very harmful for these children and society as a whole? It's push you to come to a metric conclusions, not how it aims to have a conclusive answer. Because not how not every engagement or answer or whatnot is asked for a solution, right? Sometimes you just need your voice to be heard. Sometimes you need these connections of people understand that you have such emotion and you are different, because there's 7 billion people of the world, and there's not needs to be right or wrong, but I just want to be heard. It's much more important on our side. Secondly, why is it practically harmful? Number 1, why you leads to a no real connection in the world? Because not how what make you best friend, I emphasized to you earlier, is that you have a same vibe, you have this perhaps same value and same reactions to a certain things, maybe I love BTS and you love Twice. That's okay. Those are the things that make people stronger, because it's such a resourceful tool. Even if you have conflict with these people, you are able to understand that this is the experience that doesn't align us, and that's what make me utilize that I have to find the people that is safe, to find the people that is safer community to me. Logical reasons push you to have a certain metric, to have a certain conclusive answer to the problem that you have, which never allow you to express who you are. Secondly, it's against the idea of democracy. Not how democracy allows people to have different role and perspective in a society in order to help society improve and whatnot. The moment that you allow logical approach, or you push your children to always think logically of what and of whatnot, you always think about how do I conform into this this metric that already how do I do better in the debate, or how do I grow being richer in the system that is oppressed to me. You don't allow these people to think maybe there's a problem of why I feel angry and whatnot. You oppress the idea of angry or angry and whatnot in order to conform to this narrative. It's very, very harmful, because note how logical approach is always a power asymmetry that is dictated by the society and not conform to every single individual, and does not value people the samely. Before I move on, I'll take closing if you have any. All right, note that there's none POI. Lastly, I want to talk about why is it very important for minority. Not how like minority, we are not just talking about LGBTQ or people in African American. We think that minority come in many forms. It's like come of how you view the system of the society and how you behave as well. It's come in two things: birth lottery. Maybe you're born pretty, maybe you're born more charismatic. All of those things is to say that people are allowed to have a different opinion and emotions when it comes to making their own decisions. That is the most authentic way and create a more diverse society possible. When you insert this logical approach to these children, you're asking them to conform to a society that is inherently disenfranchised to them, that doesn't listen to their opinion. You ask this minority to work harder in order for people to understand. You ask these children to work in a way or think in the way that majority thinks in order to get any changes or any engagement, because you are so afraid to show yourself out. And that is very harmful, because note how activists, how protests are always more likely to garner support when they use emotions, when they trigger the emotions of people that is oppressed. Because note how if you use logical approach to like African American, nobody like or people like in a minority group, they don't able to care, because they have a surviving skill that they need to care about, for example, have to work and not. But when you use emotions, it's able to connect people in a deeper level and understand that this is the struggle that we face, rather than a logical approach that is dictated by the society that oppressed them to begin with. We don't want that in our children. We are so proud to stand on OO.
Let me okay. I've set up my notepad and I can start in 3, 2, 1. Panel, this often happens to me, and now I will ensure that it doesn't. What usually happens when you're opening government, it all has 3 minutes of framing that frames most of the debate, and then people forget about it since they have a short-term memory. Look, do not forget until the end of the debate that we have 3 pieces of analysis that says that emotions are intuitive and instinctive to people, that you can reach them and experience them by yourself. What isn't, as even OO themselves concede, and a lot of people are not necessarily born logical, because logic is a skill that you work on and develop on, and that approach to life isn't something that happens by itself. Then, if in the status quo, everyone has access to emotions and to a certain extent, to a large extent, but not everyone has access to logic to a great extent, then we believe it is the duty of both the parents and the schools to teach their kids how to have that logical approach, right? This means that this is not also like we have fiat, because yeah, it's 18, but the thing here is that this is not coming and saying you have to be robots, fuck your emotions, just ignore and don't look at them, because you know what that would be? That would be illogical. The way you teach your kid a logical approach is to say, hey, do you think this will keep you happy, right? You may be happy in this relationship now. Hey, check your biases. Are you sure that you're staying here because you're in love and happy, or are you emotionally manipulated? Hey, you really want to be an artist, but are you sure that this is going to be economically viable for you, right? This is not saying, fuck your happiness, only go for the highest paying job and become a machine of capitalism, because that would be illogical. That will obviously lead to you not being happy. This is not making decisions based purely on how you feel in the moment, and giving kids the framework to use that logical approach later in life. When I say this, a lot of what I will talk to you about just falls completely, because then they cannot really claim agency, because in the status quo, people that do not have access to a logical approach are denied the agency to use that logical approach to make decisions. We are the ones that try to teach it to them. So they also cannot say, but they will only like ignore and push back their emotions, because that's not the logical thing to do. Logical approach means that you recognize, I am feeling bad right now, but let's see if I can rationalize it. Let's see how I can best deal with this and not immediately go into panic. Another thing of preemptive is that I think that there might be an opposition argument that comes in and says, look, this will ensure that kids lose passion because they'll always choose the safe and the rational option. Here's the thing. I don't think that's necessarily bad. Why? Because I think a lot of people in the status quo believe that they have the capacity to be extremely the very best at something. They can succeed in something really, really random, like acting, the fucking 16-year-old us here in debating, or something along those lines. Here's the thing. those things are usually not going to be reachable for us. There are 400 teams of worlds, about 50 of them broke, and 3 of them can claim to be the world champions at the end, right? It is very statistically unlikely for you to become a successful artist later on. This means that if in the status quo you have access to emotion and passion, but there is nothing to counteract that balance, it is better for someone to come in and say, hey, you know, that's probably not going to work out. You should have a plan B ready. You can try this, but only when you know that you're not going to end up on the street and hungry if this does not work out. What's going to be the rest of the speech? And the rest of the speech is going to be basically impacting what Ollie talked about, because I think that, so there are 2 things here. 1, childhood becomes a lot less stressful when you have access to a logical approach. Secondly, you long-term make better decisions and you better deal with grief. But why does childhood become less stressful? And actually, this is important because if you have a shitty childhood, this is probably going to either not allow you to emotionally develop or not allow you to study enough or make good decisions for later on in life. But here's the thing. 1, a lot of kids are under stress because they do not have the long-term perspective. They've only been alive for like 10 to 15 years. They don't know what the real world looks like, but also they don't know that 1 year of their lives is going to be, now looks like a 10th of their life, but is going to really be the 80th of their life. This means that since they don't have access to that kind of perspective, their emotions are going to be basing only what they know and what they experience. What's the comparative then? The comparative, when you give them the logical approach, you avoid them, you give them the ability to minimize short-term harms, like bullying, because you can come in and say, oh, that guy is bullying me, that's shitty. But that's not going to matter in 5 years when I graduate high school, right? This is not going to scar me for life. Or he's doing this because he's insecure. He's doing this because he really does not like, he's just a shitty person. There's nothing wrong with me. Giving you that logical approach allows you to have those kinds of reactions. The same applies for school grades. Me getting an F on a test in high school does not fucking matter. But in the moment when you're a kid and have no perspective, it feels like it's the end of the world. When you give you that logical approach, and then you feel like the idea, hey, look, this is, when you get hit with the idea that a hard emotion hit you because you got an F, if you have that logical approach in your back, and you can say, okay, let's rationalize this. Let's see what actually happened. I'm feeling angry. Is this justified? Is this not? It's going to be a lot easier for you, and your childhood is going to be less stressful. Before I go to long-term, closing opposition.
Yeah, so let's be clear about this. You're saying that if there is a bully, then you're going to tell your child, well, it's fine. In 5 years, you'll be fine and you'll forget about this, instead of teaching them how to deal with their emotions.
Oh, no, not teaching people how to deal with their emotions is illogical, right? That is, to be constantly angry is not a life you would logically want. Suppressing emotions, not logical. That's the thing. You're trying to give them the framework to say, approach this logically. Even if you cannot stop your bully, the logical first thought is to fucking call your teacher, even if you're afraid. The second thought is that maybe this, even if they are not helping you, this is not going to matter in 5 years. The thing is that you give the kids the ability to rationalize small shitty things happening to themselves, so they're not scarred for the rest of their fucking lives. Great, let's talk about long-term, because I think there are great long-term benefits for kids. Recognize if there's no other access to logical approach, this is, and logical approach is not something you can learn later on, because you kind of skip that emotional development phase. What's the thing here then? Firstly, I think it's about dealing with grief, because when you're hit with grief and you're overwhelmed by emotions, if you do not have a logical framework to fall back on, you're going to suffer greatly. What's the comparative? If you do not have this logical framework, you're going to be really hit by it. You're going to be depressed, sad. You know that this person is gone forever, and that makes you feel shitty. Okay, but what happens on our side of the house? On our side of the house, you can have that moment, and you're used to know how to come in and say, okay, this is horrible. I'm feeling sad. I'm depressed, and that's fine. But I know they wouldn't want me to be sad. I know that there's nothing I can do now. This doesn't remove the sadness and the grief, but allows you to deal with it better. Same thing, same logic applies to abusive emotional relationships, because when you have that logical approach, you're more likely to realize, look, this is not good for me. He's emotionally abusing me. He's physically abusing me. I might be in love, but this is obviously not the right choice for me to stay in, right? Or just the career path in general, and going for something more safe and not ending up on the streets. This is the largest impact in the debate at the end. Do you know why? Because these kinds of things are what make your day-to-day life when you become an adult. So if we can ensure that you deal with those kinds of things better, we give you the ability to be a better person. We win the debate. Vote open government.
Thank you very much for that speech.
12. Perfect. Okay. Am I audible? Everything okay?
Yep, you're audible. Just before you start, Gil, your computer is unmuted. Can you just mute?
One second. Take one POI from closing. Otherwise, I'm gonna start less than 10 seconds. Okay. 3, 2, 1. Before we make things political, fundamental desire, or before we make things political or rational, fundamental desire and human needs are driven by human emotions and background. No matter how much you rationalize it, before you understand where that rationale comes from, because it's probably shaped by the background and the upbringing that your parents did, you don't understand how your choice is necessarily fully rational. You don't understand, you make that choice. I'll take that as the best case of government. Even if for someone, here's whether I'm right or wrong, because I provided the 7-minute speech of my logic, I feel validated when I'm accepted and heard. This means before I understand that I need validation and heard as an emotional well-being, the government best case is not achieved. But first of all, like, who shapes what is logic, right? As far as we live in capitalistic society with high emphasis on high individual meritocracy, this means probably even if you teach your kids logic, if they fail in something, whether it's a breakup or like failure to find a job or failure to pass exam, it means it will be intrinsic emphasis on individual values, because they as an individual fail to pass exam, because in this meritocratic society they fail to pursue what is good. Because for them to exclude themselves from this society, government can claim it's symmetrical, because for them to exclude from themselves from the society, they need to have an emotional internal understanding of what their needs are and how they're different from this society. First, I'm going to rebut government case that rational approach your decision. For example, are you happy? Do you want to pursue this? Opposition wanted to have, a government side want to have both a cake and eat the cake. They're not exclusive. The motion clearly says that you will be sacrificing emotions over the logic. It means that you clearly trade off, and it's a trade-off. Like if it's obviously a no trade-off option, the debate wouldn't exist. Please note, the government case is feeling bad. I don't know, maybe breakup is not simply about feeling bad, right? But about feeling abandoned because your childhood reasons, because your parents left you. Maybe because feeling lack of stability, because you don't have stabilizing anchor in your life as a partner. This is important because no matter how many partners you're going to find, if you don't satisfy this fundamental need that's coming from you because it's shaped by the background that you have, you don't necessarily satisfy the needs that you have because you don't understand them. For the government to reach the benefits that they're claiming, such as feeling bad and feeling happy, they need to prove you why kids will have emotional understanding to begin with. Please note that the government doesn't even know what this emotion is about. It's not about angry or feeling bad, because all these emotions are the labels of the things that we have needs as a desires, right? All these are the surface level. These emotions have cause, such as feeling sad because I broke up with my relationship, because I'm aware that I want to validate myself through my partner, because this is what emotional well-being is about. It's not only about feeling sad, but more about fundamental causes. You can't control more than half of your needs and wants. They're mostly shaped by your background. Government is like David Guetta solving racism by playing a song. First question is debate. How does this solve, like how does this make people's life inherently better, like all the impacts are there? My partner already told you how it's against human value principle, because it's fundamentally disrespects human core value of human being. Because fundamentally, the reason why we have movements, we have relationships, and we have society society is because we want our emotions needs to be satisfied, and we want to satisfy them through these institutions because we want to exist in these institutions to be validated. I'm going to extend even further on impact. One, emotions are far more accessible tool to have. Please note that no matter how much government tries to explain to you how this like logic is inaccessible, I will definitely, no matter how much logically and analytically correct will be, Bo's sales speech will be much more fancier and much more logically appealing than my speech because his language will be much more accessible, much more fancier to look. But when there's a comparison of emotions, my own understanding, it will be emphasis on myself instead of an external. Thus, in a society where everyone's opinion is highly accessible, you always feel that your reasons are not important because there are always someone with stronger premises and analysis. Comparatively, under emotional prioritization, it's about important what is for you in particular. But B, emotional understanding leads to preemption of the problem, right? If judges are self-aware, and if you're probably self-aware about your friends, you notice that most of your friends do the same mistakes over and over. This is important because only through emotional understanding, you can understand why you make those decisions, right? Because you can rationalize why you make those decisions. You can rationalize why you feel that way. But without emotional understanding, you don't understand why you made those decisions to begin with. For example, my friend changed their boyfriends every 2 months, and then they're unhappy for months until they get a new boyfriend. On the other opposition side, they have emotional understanding that they have a commitment problem because of the problems because of the parents they didn't provide enough attention in their childhood. This is important because understanding the needs through being emotionally aware only then leads you to rationalization way. Because for you to rationally lead a good life, you find first identify the need, then you find the tools that will satisfy those needs internally. Please note, for you to understand that's how the rationalization works. Because basically government told you that rationalization is important, right? On the government side, people live internally in confusion because you don't understand why you do things. You do something, you react to it logically. For example, when you fail exam, you probably think how shitty you were because you don't understand why you did it, right? Because you understand why you just couldn't pass the exam. You say you didn't study well enough. The only way to understand is to understand through emotions. For example, if you're afraid of strangers, instead of focusing on logical reasons that are told by society, it's like maybe because of your gender, you focus on emotional needs that your parents implemented on you by scaring you from strangers. This is not possible on the government side because your logical reasons will focus on external things like your appearance and like how the socioeconomic background. Like government can't both have a cake and eat it, right? Having emotional bandwidth is about understanding yourself. On the opposition side, uniquely, when you fail exam, you probably still feel shitty, but you failed the exam in a meritocracy society. Before I move on, I'll take closing. Argument, please.
If people are taught to be logical, people will not be easily deceived by false romantic talks and dreams. We actually protect people from domestic abuse and bad relationship.
How you protect people from domestic abuse and the relationship? Because if it is a person who domestic abuse assumes that one person in a relationship has higher power, even if that person is logical, right? They will not be logical. Like if that person tells you, because in domestic abuse, if that person tells you how you are feeling, how you're shaping your narrative, they still can do that under your study as well. There are also two things uniquely. One, you have better coping mechanism because you understand that you are fucking depressed to even prepare for the exam instead of telling you that it's your fault entirely. This means you try to find coping mechanism by directly targeting that you were lazy for the exam and why you were lazy. Secondly, you try to find the needs that you have. Maybe you failed the exam because it doesn't satisfy your needs. Maybe you should try to another school instead of doubling down on the art school that the government side is claiming. Under all these cases, opposition directly targets the needs and wants that people have for them in order to make the rational decisions. No matter how much you try to rationalize your way, you can't do that before you understand why those things are important. Even if, before you understand why those things are important and why those things are uniquely making you happy, no matter how much you rationalize your way through them. Very proud to propose.
lots of pages. One point of framing before I start. I think the major change actually under the motion, the actor that actually changes the behavior the most is parent, right? Because we're talking about behavior towards children as opposed to the whole of society or specifically schools. Parents are the major emotional support network right now for children, so we think that's a major change here. I think schools are less relevant here because of loss of children, because of strict educational structure. We think they're at the outset not that much of an emotional arena in terms of support of children. I think that the major actor of the change is here. We think also, and now moving on to rebuttal to CG before I even start the point, I think that when we talk about societal shift, that is very far from the motion. Like society on the abstract, it's not really responsible for emotional education for children. It is the probability to increase funding for studying psychology is really low at the outset, especially when emotion becomes more and more taboo. You know, also about other societal issues they talk about, there are a lot of quote-unquote logical reasons to do things like banning the hijab or other things against minority, and emotional discourse in society is at the outset really low. By the characterization from OG, which means that the chance for systematic change here is really low. One other thing that CG says is it will fund another metrics to self-evaluate. We think that's true only if you actually understand your emotion and don't shy away from them, because from the subject it makes you feel painful. When you don't feel catharsis, that doesn't happen. That's part of my analysis. So 2 points of my analysis. Firstly, why this harms the connection between parents and children, and therefore prevents the benefits that it offers you. Really, why that makes traumas worse and don't give you good emotional cues to deal with them. Let's get to my first point. How is it likely that parents will actually act? We get very flowery representation from OG, but actually, what do you think the parents respond to a child that is suffering from some sort of psychological difficulty? Like that should things happen to children on their scale on a daily basis. They fail something at school, they get hit by a bully, they get their crush laughs at them, they get like a scary dream, and so they're scared and crying and all that thing. We think what's likely to happen even by OG characterization is simply the parent telling the child, you need to turn it off, your emotion, you need to talk more logically to connect with me. We think that the parent is likely to not respond to the child themselves in an emotional way, to show some sort of personal example, which is a punishment to the child. Actually, what the parent won't do is hug the child, say they're there, because that's not a logical solution to the trouble. It's just making them feel better, right? The extreme of that is the parent saying, I can't talk to you when you're like that, literally walk out of the room, a terrible emotional toll for the child. Or as OG said, tell them, check your biases, or are you being manipulative right now? I'm trying to blaming the child for their emotions, right? What does the child, like the bottom line here is effectively a punishment for the child for being emotionally expressive. What does the child learn from that? Firstly, that emotion is bad, and secondly, that the parents are not to be trusted. Emotions are bad because the child doesn't understand nuance like emotions are good, but shutting them off is how you deal with them better. You understand that emotion drove a punishment from the parent, a negative response, and therefore an emotion outside is negative in itself. We also understand that parents are not a good source for a problem solution. When OG tell us, don't worry about this bully, and sometime we'll forget about that or think about that logically, it doesn't help your trouble with you being scared of a bully. It's distant and patronizing. You can't trust a person to tell you something like that, especially if something about which is outside of their control, like a bully. So how is the child likely to behave next to that? First of all, they lose the ability for emotional processing, because you need to experience an emotion until the end to understand it, to separate it between others and articulate it. In the comparative, the emotion is shameful, it gives you negative results, so you're not going to process it. Also means you don't reach that catharsis, which OG are right, it is
fourth term, but it is logically precedent for you to be able to act logically after that. You have to think logically when you're angry, when you're scared, when you're worried, even if sometimes after that you are more calm, the subject is still a sore point because you haven't reached emotional catharsis, you haven't solved it emotionally in your head, and you don't want to think about that. You prefer to not study that much a subject if you failed in it, because only thinking about math is hurtful when you failed and you didn't get an emotional response. You prefer not to try a new relationship because it still the same of the previous one. And also, as a response to CG, you address your friends more in the comparative because you trust your parents less. And they are a really bad source for advice on the comparative. They will tell you not to study which CG you don't like. You will compare to them more with CG you don't like. So they are on their own metric. This is a bad response. This is so bad because there are a lot of things outside of your control as a child. Your parents may divorce, there are bullies at school, your crush can do. But that means that you also don't get a solution, but also you don't get an emotional response. Like the only way to deal with that is to deal with that emotionally, and you don't get that. Let's take OG.
Parents of both sides still want to console and provide comfort because presumably they love their kids. But if you teach both, emotions will always be stronger and lead to all the harms that are worse than catharsis for yelling at your bully when you're 10.
OG can't co-op an emotional positive response to your child and help them process their emotion, while at the same time teaching them to deal with the problem logically. OG need to pick a stance in this debate. This is bad because you don't deal with your difficulties and your emotions are still there, only repressed to come up later as anger, as lack of responsibility, as control and being volatile. It means you don't want to talk to your parents to learn logic from them, which prevents the effectiveness of a gun's benefit, which they haven't analyzed why they are effective at teaching them, and this is a massive gap. And there are a lot of problems in life that don't have a clear solution. You don't have a way to deal with them except emotionally. And when you blame yourself for your parents' divorce because nobody talked to you about that, because even presenting your emotion of negativity about that is giving you negative responses, because you become more closed and inside your head, and kids blame themselves for parents divorcing, and when nobody talks to them about that, they continue to do that. Traumas become more entrenched, they become more volatile, they are driven more by their emotions on a day-to-day basis than in our comparative, only by negative emotions. And we think that is terrible.
Thank you very much for that speech.
In 3, 2, 1. Our case basically shows to you why uniquely teaching children how to deal with emotions is something that only parents can do. Specifically, when they do this, this leads to better reactions and better decision making by both government's metrics. And in most situations in life, you actually need the emotional response. Given this, we basically take out all the other teams in the debate by their own metrics. I'm going to prove. I'm going to have 3 points in my speech. First of all, what is more important that parents specifically will teach? Secondly, what happens in moments where you can't solve problems? Lastly, where is people's decision making better? Before that, a few points of extraneous rebuttal. First of all, CG kind of misunderstood our point when they say punishing a child is not logical. Punishment was a rhetorical tool here, right? We say that preventing an emotional response, not hugging your child, this is the thing that the child analyzes and understands, as their parents don't want to be in touch with them, and they shouldn't be in touch with their emotions. This means that the child learns emotions are something bad that is taboo and shouldn't be discussed. Secondly, when they're talking about reaction to bullies and stuff like that, note they don't have to come through anger. Like, punching a bully can actually be a very good solution to your problem. This is what literally a lot of people in the world actually believe in. So on their side, it's much more likely that people will react in violence as a solution compared to a situation where a bully punches you and then you're a child and you are scared, and because you are scared, you just run away. So that just goes to our side. Lastly, they try to prove like huge societal impacts because people are going to now react super logically to politics. Here's the thing, this is out of this debate. Reacting to politics is not something that happens instantaneously, right? You have an entire political system, you have debates, you have a lot of stuff that guide you towards discussing policy and stuff like that. When this motion talks about solving problems that happen to you day to day, or your reactions to what happens to you in your own life, this has nothing to do with political reactions, right? Their case is just out of this debate because most of the political system is logical and happens through a longer time span than most of the decisions that other teams in this debate talk about. Lastly, they are dependent on the fact that the entire society becomes more logical. We prove to you that emotions actually drive people more because they don't deal with them. Therefore, we win their case at the biscuit. What is more important that the parents will teach? Here's the thing. Opening governments say, well, the society that we'll live in is very logical and not emotional. Secondly, they say emotions are something that is very intuitive and therefore you shouldn't teach them. Well, here's the thing. Both of these things can't happen at the same time, right? If all of the society actually works logically, this means that also schools would prepare you for later in life education from the country. The way that teachers treat specific children happens more logically than emotionally. This means that not only you shouldn't prioritize logics over emotions, on the contrary, parents are the only actor that can teach you about emotions compared to an entire system which is going to teach you logic because of the status quo that opening government proved. This basically flips their case over their head. Why are parents the only ones that are able to teach emotions? Because a teacher has 30 different children, which they can't actually understand their whole emotional world, right? Think about how many people you're able to have intimate interactions on a day-to-day basis. This is basically like your family and like your closest friends. You can't actually understand so many children. Secondly, our case just answers the fact that emotions are intuitive directly. Why? We explain why under opening government's world, people will have, like, for them, it's really intuitive to have emotions because they have practiced this with their parents. Given that children think that emotions are taboo, that they are bad, that they have no capacity to think about their emotions again and again, and that they can't actually understand their emotions, name them, understand how to deal with them, because they don't go through this period in their life. This means that emotions are less intuitive, so the whole mitigation from opening government falls. Note also that you listen to your parents less when they talk to you about logic, because you feel less connected to them when they don't give you the emotional outlet, which you all need in a lot of situations. So you also get less the logical responses that your parents teach you. This basically proves that in either comparative, we win. Being opposition say that emotions are unintuitive because they are based on desires. So here's the thing, opening government say that desires are on their side as well because you want a specific job and you prioritize yourself in a capitalistic society. Our case is not is more unique than OO's to emotions, because we showed why specifically children are going to learn to cope with their emotions better on our side. Let's talk about what happens in moments where you can't solve your problem. So the motion talks about solving problems logically instead of emotionally. Let's be clear about this. When you have a bully, and we asked this in a POI, you can't actually solve this problem in lots of situations. Why is this? Because there are stuff that you have no control over. Lack of control is an emotion that you need to deal with. You can't always have solutions. In most situations in life, you don't have control because there are a lot of circumstances, right? Other people's feelings, stuff unexpected like a bus that is late and makes you late for a meeting, systems which are bigger than you, like a place of work or political systems. This means in most situations, governments don't have a comparative because children are going to constantly try to look for solutions instead of dealing with their problems. This means in most situations in this debate, they have no comparative and we should win because children deal with most problems in life better in this debate. Closing.
We are not saying that you can't punish a bully.
Well, it doesn't even matter, right? We just say that in a lot of situations, this is likely to happen, and therefore, you don't even prove that case. So let's talk about where do people make better decisions. So opening opposition say, well, you need people to acknowledge your emotions to feel well. We agree with them, but we prove to you that it's bad. We agree with them, but we prove why you can't express your emotions, and this is going to harm every interaction because your emotions are going to explode at the end of the day. This means that we prove to you a bigger impact, and we prove basically the basis for opening opposition's case, which says that relationships are going to be worse because people can express their emotions. Why does this happen less on government side, that people can control their emotions? Because they're stuck inside their head. They replay their emotions again and again. The moment they get angry, they don't know how to touch them. They feel that this is painful and they shouldn't actually deal with them. This means that the emotions are kept bottled up inside without being able to talk about them. This means that you can't control them. This means that we basically flip again, opening government's case on their head, because this means on our side, people control their emotions more. This proves to you that protests are going to be better because people are less likely to be violent at the end of the day.